Blumenfeld.
Thanks very much. Good evening. First of all, thank you for coming out to hear live music and to hear people talk about important issues and to experience the connection between the two. I'm Larry Blumenfeld. This is an important place. This is an important space. It's also been very hospitable and warm to me, and I've done a lot of programs here. This particular series, which this is the 24th one we've done, Jazz and Social Justice, I began with the museum in early 2017, and it's not coincidental when that was and why that was. And really, I remember in that January that year, we were out in this, some of us were out in the street at marches, and it was a compelling moment, but also I realized a lot of people were marching and talking about a lot of different ideas, a lot of different things, and we needed to talk about them. And the musicians that I write about that I know were very committed to a lot of different issues. So one of the very first editions of this that we did considered environmentalism. And as you know, these issues do not go away. So here we are, we have sort of an embarrassment of riches with the band you will hear. And I intended this to be a true salon. We'd experience music in an intimate atmosphere, and then we'd engage in a conversation about something. So this one, Andromeda Turre, When Glaciers Cry, Climate Action and Jazz's Eco-Spiritual Legacies. Andromeda Turre is a vocalist, instrumentalist, and composer whose music spans disciplines, media, genres in very original ways. This is a place that celebrates legacies. She draws on many legacies, not least the legacies of her two parents, Steve Turre and Akua Dixon, who are both musicians who I think are pioneering in their own ways. Andromeda has inherited that pioneering gene. What you'll hear tonight, or I think all of what you'll hear tonight, has to do with her latest project, From the Earth, a jazz suite that addresses environmental justice and amplifies humanity's deep connection to the planet. You'll hear what it incorporates, and after the music, we'll dig into what inspired her and what we should and might know about those issues. Please welcome Andromeda Turre.
Breathe and see how fire controls the destiny of your wish as it plays on the lighted candles, celebrating the new world as one nation. This cake, a batter of sounds that taste like colors and colors that sing. Let me tell you about the angle of incidence, the place where fire sparks the ray that gives light as it touches each soul. Breathe and lean on nature to teach you the way. Messages from the spheres will speak to you in the language of trees, glaciers, winds, beasts, birds, and the melodies of the moon, planets, sun, and other stars will roll onto your eardrum as unassuming as a cloud. The anvil, hammer, stirrup, the original score in synchronicity, in unity, in harmony. The heart, the first drum beat. The heart, the gift in every sphere. The heart I call the unifying axis of the spheres. Put aside for now the place where dreams dry rotted. Let the laughter live a little. So sing and skip and dance in swirling skirts. Partner with like spirits and run hand in hand. Feast and swim. The overflowing joy may leave you worn out but satisfied. Remember who loved you as you catch your breath.
Thank you so much for coming out on this dreary evening. That first tune that we played, well, actually, at first you heard a poem, which was by Betty Niels. You might recognize her voice if you've ever heard Rahsaan Roland Kirk's tune, Theme from the Olympians, because she's the poet at the beginning of that. And she toured with Rahsaan and wrote lyrics to a lot of his songs, and she is my godmother. And when I sent her the score of this music, she sent me back a voice note that she just did into her iPhone of that poem. And I was like, well, this has to go on the record. I mean, and I never had her re-record it. That's the actual voice note that she sent me. So we started with Betty Niels. And then that tune that we just played is called Hydrosphere. My From the Earth suite is broken down into 4 segments: earth, sky, sea, and ice. And that's the tune that sort of brings us into the aquatic realm. But we're gonna be jumping around a bit tonight. We're gonna go into the earth segment. This tune is called Earth Waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Insignificant when you think of space and time. Monumental in context of your beating heart and song from inside the earth. Listen carefully, consciousness leads us into rebirth. Reverberate the energy. Reverberate the sound. as we float through outer space. Insignificant when you think of space and time. Monumental in context of your beating heart and mind. Planted on the ground, we grow further from the sound, from the melody that's sung from inside the earth. Listen carefully, consciousness leads us into rebirth. So we had the sea, that was the earth. Now we're going to move into the ice. And in order to compose this suite of music, I spent months and months interviewing communities at the intersection of harm due to climate change, as well as harm due to the remnants of systems like redlining and colonization. The woman who you're going to hear at the beginning of this next song is an excerpt from an interview that I did with Rhonda Hiscock, who is an environmental scientist, and she's also from an indigenous community in Newfoundland, Canada, way, way, way up north, where the melting polar ice caps are really starting to affect how her people have lived on that land for thousands of years. This song came to me in a dream. And in the dream, I was walking across a glacier with a herd of beautiful animals, and I heard a voice on the wind saying, "Hey, Amulena, hey, Amulena." And all of the words that you'll hear in this song are from that dream. And I've met people from all over the world to try to see if it means anything in any language. To this day, I haven't found anything. If you speak a language and you're like, oh, I know what that means, please tell me. I tried for months to write lyrics to this song, and nothing felt quite as right as these sort of God-given incantations. So please just go with the flow on Amulena.
It seems that the ice is less predictable and less safe than what it was when I was a child. I think it's not unexpected given the temperature increases that we're seeing across the globe, but I do think it's a change that we can slow down, and it requires efforts by all of us as individuals and requires good government policy to help change behaviors. I'm hopeful that we'll make the changes necessary to help reduce the impacts of climate change and have a healthy planet for our children and future generations. I think recognizing the problem is a big part of that, and making decisions on a national and global level to implement change.
Hey, Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Oh, oh. Hey, Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Oh, Hey, Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Amulena. Hey, Amulena. Oh, I'm going to introduce you to these incredible musicians that have been accompanying me this evening. On saxophone and on iwi, Chelsea Barretts. On the piano, Ilu. On the bass, Noah Garabedian. And on drums, Orion Turre, who's also my brother. We have time for one more song, and we're going to go into the fourth segment, which is the sky. And when I interviewed the woman for this, her name is Miss Margaret Gordon, and she comes from a historically redlined area of West Oakland, where the air pollution today there is so bad that 1 out of 5 children under the age of 5 in her neighborhood ends up in the emergency room with breathing problems, and over 50% of the children have asthma. And so, rightfully so, when I spoke with her, she was quite angry about the state of the pollution. And A lot of the people that I interviewed had sentiments of rage, and I couldn't leave that out doing an album about environmental justice. So I put it all into this one song, which is called Finger on the Trigger, and I wrote it to directly address those who continue to choose profit over people and planet. I want to encourage you to join us. A lot of people are angry about a lot of things right now. So if you want to yell or shout or whatever, just feel free to let it out on this song. This is the one to rage, okay? One, two, Hey man, we're getting sicker. You got your finger on the trigger. You feel the vigor, cause all your profits getting thicker. You send your bidders and all your fancy city slickers out here to bicker, but we don't wanna hear your gibber like how you figure. We gotta sip on the pot liquor. We're getting sicker, cause we're the folks you don't consider. You're an emitter. We gotta click our ruby slippers. We're feeling bitter, and you don't wanna see the picture. We're getting sicker. You got your finger on the sicker, you got your finger on the trigger. We got the scripture, we're tired of calling the grave digger. We're moving quicker, and now our movement's getting bigger. Send you the shivers, because the plot is getting thicker. Look in the mirror, your people slowly getting sicker. And here's the kicker, our future's headed down the river. Not here to snicker, what happens here is just a sliver. The future's dimmer, you try to paint a perfect picture. We beg to differ, you got your finger on the
finger on the hey man, we're getting sicker. You got your finger on the hey man, we're getting sicker. You got your finger on the hey man, we're getting sicker. You got your finger on the hey man, we're getting sicker. You got your finger on the.
Chelsea Barrett's on saxophone. Elu on piano. Noah Garabedian on the bass. Orion Turre on the drums. My name is Andromeda Turre. Stick around. We got a whole lot more for you.
Maybe one more round of applause for this incredible music. I told you we had an embarrassment of riches, and you know, I knew something reminded me of Abby Lincoln, and well, Abby screamed on "We Insist," and Andromeda did that. In a couple of minutes, we're going to do a little housework here and clear things away. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to invite two more friends up to join Andromeda and I, and we're going to get into some of the things that she alluded to and, well, talked about very directly.
And you were right on the Max Roach tip. That last tune was actually inspired by It's Time by Max Roach. So you're in the right direction.
Before we get into that, though, I want to kind of amplify something Ryan said earlier. You know, we're here. What she's doing, what they're doing, what we're doing involves culture, not like high-minded capital C culture at Lincoln Center necessarily, but the idea of culture, music, art, writing that has to do with our daily lives, has to do with our spiritual lives, has to do with our social and political lives, and that's really what this place is about, what that music was about, what our conversation will be about. I was going to say in times like these, but we really haven't had times like these. Even 2017, when I started this series, wasn't quite times like this now. So I'm going to invite, sometimes culture gets very embattled. The idea of culture I was just talking about is embattled right now. I want to invite you to consider joining me in being a warrior for culture. Whatever that means. Could mean supporting an institution like this. It could be reaching out to your elected officials. It could be trying to figure out what the artists and writers and poets and dancers among us need when culture is embattled. But if we care about culture, this is a moment. And it's a moment to be reckoned with. You know, I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal today that was about the great pianist, band leader, composer Arturo Farrell, and about a piece that he wrote that was in a more metaphorical way about water and about profiteering and politics that endanger our most precious element. So, you know, this is in the air among us. As soon as we do get set up, we're going to be joined by two people. One is Raya Salter, who's an attorney, consultant, and these are people who work directly with Andromeda on this project and in a broader way on the direction she's taking. So Raya Salter is an attorney, consultant, educator, and clean energy law and policy expert with a focus on energy and climate justice. She's the founder of the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center and a member of the New York State Climate Action Council. We'll also be joined by Mark Lamano, who's at the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami. He specializes in holistic and interdisciplinary approaches to music that incorporate ethnography, historiography, performance practice, and music theory, as well as embodied perception, environmental humanities, and sustainability studies and improvisation studies. He connects Andromeda's project to holistic African-American traditions of environmentally conscious community building informed by Afro-diasporic spiritual practices. So, you know, so in other words, we're going to delve into both the very practical, on-the-ground activism and the specific climate change and environmental issues, but also the more conceptual, spiritual, philosophical, aesthetic ideas that are in the culture world we're talking about are never completely separate. Think we're almost there? We almost there? Yep. We're there? Can I call Raya and Mark up here and join me? You know, I've done a lot of writing about New Orleans, especially after the flood that followed Hurricane Katrina, about other coastal cities. And, you know, the issues that Andromeda brought up are never far from mine and never far from cultural centers. So wait, Mark, Raya, come up here, take a seat, join us in our conversation.
All right,
Guys, people. Hi. Here you are. Okay. Pick your seats. Raya, it's nice to meet you.
Wonderful to meet you.
So maybe one place to start is just, Andromeda. How did the road that led to this begin?
This entire suite actually started with a trip to Iceland. My best friend calls me up and she said, "You were my maid of honor at my wedding. 20 years in, we're renewing our vows. You have to be our witness, you and your husband." And I was like, "Yeah, of course I'm going to be there for you." She goes, "Cool. We're going to renew our vows inside a glacier in Iceland." I was like, "Oh, you should have led with that." So I got to Iceland and I started having all of these supernatural experiences with the environment, with the aurora borealis, seeing lava birth new ground, like all of this stuff. And I actually wrote Hydrosphere, which I started with. I wrote that in Iceland, standing on the black sand beach. It just felt like the sea was calling me. And I wrote another tune on the album called Cryosphere, which is written from the perspective of the melting glacier.
Yeah, I remember you told one writer, "I felt the glacier was sad, as if it had seen all the dinosaurs go extinct."
Yeah.
It was now,
Yeah, I tend to feel things from nature. And as I was hiking down through this glacier, I just had this overwhelming sense of awareness, as if the glacier knew that it was coming to its end, and there was like a deep sense of sadness about that.
So now, but that might have produced a feeling in you, which you could have easily started to express through your obvious talents for music. But you went in very specific, intentional directions. And maybe I want to get Raya and Mark, have you talk about the work that you're doing. But how did you connect? How did you connect, and how did they come to this project, and how did you connect with them in terms of what you shaped here?
So when I came back after Iceland, I knew I wanted to expand upon what I had just experienced. I didn't feel right composing a suite of music about Iceland. I'd only been there one time. I don't really know much about their culture. But I'm also a Cornell University certified diversity and inclusion consultant, and I have, very popular these days, by the way. And through that work, I've worked with a lot of municipalities on the subject of environmental justice. So I felt qualified, thank you, to speak about that and to research deeper into what I already knew. And as soon as I started interviewing these communities, I was like, this is it. And I found Raya, who's on Instagram at Climate Auntie, and I was like, she is speaking my language. So she speaks to the environmental justice side of this work, and Mark speaks to the more spiritual side that jazz is tied into of this work, because it's really both. It's the justice side and the spiritual side of getting humanity to connect back with nature.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, I feel like an artist can bridge those things more easily than a reporter or a clinician, or you can get between the arguments that happen online. Raya, I know when we corresponded a little bit, and something you wrote to me really stuck with me. You said, we have an information and culture problem. Art and storytelling is such an important part of our movement. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit both the problem and frame the problem and the solution.
No, absolutely. And one, I just really, thanks to all you beautiful people, but thank you to this beautiful artist who is platforming folks who are doing grassroots, climate and environmental justice work in community. That's how I met her when I was tabling outside our library with our students who work on air quality. And she was like, no, girl, you come up and speak to your community about this issue, and it's beautiful. And then she was like, girl, I'm on tour. Like, who can you find me who's going to be in D.C. because I need to platform them too. I'm like, got you. I got you.
Yeah.
Anywhere in this country, you go across the world, I got you. We will find you people to platform. So I just wanted to say it's so important because of what you said. As frustrating and depressing as things are right now in this moment of cruelty and fear, most folks don't even know about the climate crisis. They don't know about like what is climate justice. It's about folks who are disproportionately impacted. And studies say when they do, they're like, oh, snap. Like we need to do something about that. And there's a fossil fuel industry that is spending billions of dollars to keep us in the dark and misinformation.
Right.
So that's really what I meant, is that it's, this message needs to come out. This is also it's about all of us. It's multiracial. It's about black people, brown people, white people, all coming together because it is the black and brown people who are most impacted in the United States and across the world. Now let's pass the mic.
And hit first, but like I say in Finger on the Trigger, it's starting to expand. It might be hitting the black and brown communities now, but that's really a mirror to down the future, what it's going to look like for all of us. So it's like if we can tackle this problem now and fix it now, it's not just helping this poor community or whatever marginalized community that you're like, well, I don't live there. It's not my problem. Well, guess what? Air travels. Wind moves.
No,
As we experienced
with the
in New York.
wildfires.
And of course, LA
Yeah.
is on fire. So there's that.
Raya, I'm so glad you said what you said. A few minutes ago, I mentioned this work that I'd done in New Orleans in 2005 and 6 and on after.
Cancer Alley.
Well, because the story then, what people understood was, oh, there was this big hurricane and it's so terrible that all those people, including the brass band musicians, lost their homes. And really, there was a story of levees failed because things weren't done the way they were supposed to be done. And then opportunists, profiteers, saw a chance to displace communities that had a long history of being embattled. And it turned out that their culture was the best way to tell the truth about the story. And that's, so yeah, maybe Mark, can you help us understand what we meant in the subtitle by Jazz's Eco-Spiritual Legacies? Because I know that's a...
Please break that down.
I
want to know.
Exactly, but I know it's a deep idea.
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to tell a story.
I think we already said, Raya said, storytelling's the way out here.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, when everybody was locked down, we started getting news of how the environment was rejuvenating itself. How animals were coming out and in spaces that are usually overtrodden by humans. And while I was at home during lockdown, I found Abby Lincoln's album, Holy Earth. And one of the songs in there is called Learning How to Listen. And Abby says in the lyrics, this album was recorded in 97, released in 98. She says, I'm learning to sing the blues. And I thought to myself, if anyone is qualified to say they know how to sing the blues, it's Abby Lincoln in
For
1997.
Right.
So what could she possibly mean by that? And as I was sort of looking around and watching the news, it's like, we're all sick. What does it mean to listen to the animals and the environment in a way that we could possibly change course? And I'm sorry to say that we haven't yet, there were a lot of lessons that we could have learned in that moment that we didn't. But my understanding of jazz's eco-spiritual legacies is tied to that personal story, and shortly after, and Andromeda and I have talked about this, I experienced a series of auditory hallucinations. And mind you, 45, I've got degrees, I've got academic credentials, I've been teaching students how to listen, how to make music for a long time. There was no explanation, an academic explanation for what I was experiencing. There was a spiritual expectation, and there were other people that I went to help understand that. So part of my understanding of jazz's eco-spiritual legacy is that, first and foremost, jazz musicians are people who understand themselves in relation to each other, in relation to the world that they live in, and the different spiritual practices that they use to help understand those things that aren't intellectually explainable or academically explainable. That's why I think this album is such a gift, because when I found it, I was like, this, speaking of legacy, is a continuation. Andromeda's project is a continuation of that legacy, of which Abby's record, Holy Earth, is just one other manifestation of a tradition that doesn't go back just to the beginning of jazz, but far longer than that.
Yeah, that ties into another program that I have that I've taught for many, many years called Growing Up Jazz, which I do as a keynote presentation, and I teach Black history through the lens of jazz. But I start in West Africa with the oral history traditions and then talk about how the music evolved through the transatlantic slave trade and into work songs and into spirituals. And there's all of this deeply spiritual aspect to the music, and then from there into blues, and from there into jazz. There's such a deep history of oral history in this music, and so not only with the music that I compose, but with all of the interview excerpts, it's really tying into that history that is as much a part of jazz tradition as standards, you know?
Yeah, there's one of my favorite books about a jazz musician is Robin Kelly's biography of Thelonious Monk. And where he begins is several generations before Monk, where his ancestors came from, and then through the South, where his immediate ancestors came from. And only then can you get to the story of who Monk was.
Yeah.
And then you understand how he played the piano a lot better. So I'm interested to, I've rarely seen an artistic expression that combines the way your project did, creating music, performing music, composing music, together with those lineages, and together with raw materials, interview captures from phones. Can you talk just a little bit about that artistic process? Because to me, it's really fascinating the way it works and what it represents.
Thank you so much. I was really led by spirit and by the interviews. Every song on the album is led by one or the other, or sometimes both. And so, whereas the first two songs that I composed, Hydrosphere and Cryosphere, really were like a deeply spiritual element, the last song that we did, Finger on the Trigger, that came straight out of the rage from the interviewees, right? Yeah. If you listen to the album, the song that plays on the album right before that is Miss Margaret's Lament, where you hear the excerpts of Miss Margaret talking about the things that are happening in her community. And in her speaking voice, you can hear, she's been an environmental activist since she was 13, and she's in her late 70s. You can hear it in her grovelly speaking voice, right? So all of those things inspired, even when I was doing the arrangements, because I did all of the arrangements, she's talking about how 10,000 trucks pass her door every day because they route the trucks through their Black community because nobody cares about them. And just the constant horn honking. So that's what you get when you got your finger on the It's the horns. It's like this constant irritating horn honking. Other songs, as I did the arrangements, were inspired by the environment. I live in Bedford, New York, which is about an hour north of here, and my music studio is in the woods. And so a lot of these songs, like I was literally sitting outside on the grass, just listening. And like the first song, Geosphere, on the album, there's a marimba pattern that plays. It's literally two birds that were conversing in the trees outside my studio. And I like transcribed those notes and made it so it was either the environment and like a very spiritual thing, or like right from the interviewees.
And where was Miss Margaret?
Miss Margaret is in West Oakland, California.
And how did you connect with her? How did you?
You know, finding the people to interview was really magical too, because I just started researching, and I would find somebody's work or find an article that they wrote, and I wrote to so many people, and very few people responded, and the only people that responded were women. I definitely reached out to men, but the only ones who responded were women. And likewise, on the album, it's 14 women and 6 men on the album. I also hadn't like premeditated that. It was just like whose energy and who had the right energy and technical mastery to be able to play what I wrote. And it was mostly women. So there's something also about like the divine femininity of this album that shines through, I think.
So we work actually very similarly, because my work mostly stems from doing it, like everything I think about and end up doing stems from interviews.
Yeah.
And when I hear the voice and I hear that one little thing that sets me off, and it's all, when I talk to classes about writing about music, I'm like, yeah, you might be writing a review of an album, but you need to tell a story, and that story needs to be about that musician's story. And, good, bad, what does it sound like? Those are like incidental almost.
Yeah, what's the story?
I want to return back, just because we have you here and we can get a little better educated.
And she's the point of the album, right? Is to create a space and captive listening audience for stuff like what she's doing.
But
that's the whole point.
I mean, because I feel like some people, maybe decades ago, there was a slight revelation about, okay, I'm old enough to remember the TV commercial with the Native American man crying.
Oh my God.
And okay, now maybe we have a thing called environmentalism, and it has to do with something called pollution. And then, all right, so fast forward, and people, climate change, oh, it's this bad thing, and maybe if we all stop driving cars, it might change, but what is, I know there's a more defined reality of, first of all, climate justice, and what, in between those extremes, how can we understand the moment we're in, and what ordinary people might do?
It's a big existential question, but it's one that I get a lot. So,
Right. Well,
so
I'm throwing out
I wanna
these
be like,
questions.
sure.
Yeah.
I love the way that you told that story. No, that's an important concept. Maybe I can, maybe shift into professor mode in terms of what is climate justice. It's this.
Yeah.
It's really a fundamental. The climate justice principle is that those who have done the very least to cause the climate crisis are experiencing its impacts first and worst, and those who have done the very most to cause the climate crisis are experiencing its impacts least and last. And that is true transnationally, in that you have, small island nations that are sinking that have contributed nothing to carbon, while the United States, largest historical emitter, China, are committing the most. But it's also the truth, within countries like the United States. New York City, actually, because so many of us live in apartments, we have very low per capita sort of energy use, yet we are experiencing these impacts. And then when you take that so that is what is broadly climate justice. When you take that into environmental justice, and that's what, again, I love so much about these stories, because especially when you talk to folks, especially in my experience, Black and brown folks, Black people in the United States are most impacted by all types of pollution than any other, pollution from every source. Cars, the
the infrastructure, the heating oil in the buildings, from every source than any other folks in America. But the story is, right, like, oh, good luck, girl, with the polar bears, right? You go hug some trees, sis. And don't get me wrong, we love
Ride a
polar
bike.
bears and we love trees, right? But there's like a connect the dots thing that needs to happen. Like just exactly what you told us, one piece of it, right? If you live in the Bronx, trucks are coming through, right? Constantly causing so much pollution, as does the highways. And why? Because of the redlining, because of the historical and current racism. So environmental justice, and I'll stop because I be going on. And I'm happy to go on. And
we need it. We
follow
need it.
Climate Auntie on Instagram.
Yes, follow Climate Auntie.
Although we're trying to leave the metas. We're working on it, right? Like, we're
Are
trying
you
to
on
leave the
Blue
metas.
Sky?
I'm on Blue Sky.
Okay,
Climate
there you
Auntie
go.
on Blue Sky.
There we go.
But environmental justice is it's a civil rights extension, right? People, if environmental benefits and burdens are disproportionately, distributed, you got no park, and you're living next to the industrial zone, based on race, and there's no environmental protections, right? They're not enforcing the laws. That's environmental racism right there. So that's a bit about environmental justice. We are in this very crucial moment. Support people, artists like this, but also professionals. You mentioned the DEI. We're in a terrible moment, of persecution and fear. Yet we are saying no to the cruelty. We are saying yes to the hope. And the truth is, and that's why this culture piece is so important, because if we decide that we are going to change course, we can still make a difference.
Right.
Some things are intractable. There's some targets that have been blown through. Things like the coral reefs, we're maybe saying goodbye forever, but it doesn't mean that we can't make a difference. Sorry, that was kind of a long rant.
No, we need that. We need that. And when people right now in this moment, when people are saying DEI, I want them to say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because if I want to say no, I'm against that. I want them to say I am against diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Go ahead and
Because
say
that
it with your whole chest.
makes the absurdity and cruelty of it clearer. Mark, I just got to thank you for mentioning Abby Lincoln the way you did, because she's celebrated as a great singer, but one day she will also be celebrated as a great writer and a great songwriter whose songs were very different than everyone else's songs, and in some ways prophetic. I mean, when I'm in trouble, I listen to "Throw It Away."
Oh, I love that song.
But how is there a way we can frame this moment in terms of that kind of legacy that you were talking about before? Because I sort of, in the things you were saying, I believe that when I hear your music, when I think about the subject of this very place, which we might call jazz, it really does connect that ancient with modern and future. And it really does connect that technical thing where you can tell me what chords and how many rhythms are there with a very spiritual thing in a way that diffuses, because there's a lot of defeat by dividing us. But aren't there certain unities that this legacy that you're talking about force us to enter?
Yeah, okay, so one of the lyrics that we heard, right, was choosing profit over people, right? Commercialism, capitalism, Western science. I teach at the University of Miami, a lot of higher education institutions, the way that education is structured by discipline, right? Separating things out. Those kinds of divisions, in the case of music, right? They separate the products of musical expression from not just the makers, but the communities that the musicians come from. So in the spirit of listening differently, right? And to invoke Abby again, to listen more wholly, right? From a sense of holism. to listen creatively and more openly, to constantly question, like I was saying, right? What are these auditory hallucinations? I pay my bills on my ability to convince other people that I can teach them how to listen better.
Yeah.
Right.
And so to constantly question what we know and how we can listen to work against those kinds of divisions, however they're manifest, right? To understand that music has never really been just a commercial enterprise. And especially among the African American community in the United States, when we're talking about historical legacies, we're talking about legacies that include being shut out of the kinds of institutions where the higher learning, quote unquote, and the scientific exploration was happening. The environments and the products, the books, right, and the articles. So that intellectual work, those traditions of wisdom have been continuous. They've just been expressed in different ways. So to look to the music, right, and the traditions and the people that have held it up as thoughtful traditions that are full of wisdom that we need to continually listen to over and over again to understand, for example, that there's a connection between food and recipes and gardening and agriculture, right? And specifically in the traditions that I'm talking about, Andromeda and Abbey Lincoln, specifically a tradition of Afro-diasporic and Black women in the United States who have held up knowledge traditions that we haven't been listening to enough and paying attention to enough.
Yeah. No, you've touched on a lot of very, there was once this conference of ethnomusicologists, and they invited as their keynote speaker the great Malian guitarist Ali Farka Touré. And he showed up and he talked all about farming. And they were like, what, and they was like, well, you want to know what my music is about? I come from farmers, and this is what my music's about.
Yeah.
But also you talked about something, Raya, you talked about the importance of stories. So I know, and you did such an amazing job of, in very little time, setting the story for each thing you played.
Oh, thank you.
And then including people's stories in that story. So one tiny little good that came from this decades of environmental movement where, okay, maybe we're asking paper or plastic. Maybe we're starting to pay attention to the ingredients in products and whether they have phosphates or this or that. And that's at least a little.
There's a deeper work that needs to
There's
be
much
done,
more,
I think,
much more
though.
deep work. But when it comes to music, most people are now getting their music from streaming services. So there are two things. One is look into how much money the artist gets from that model, and is this sustainable? But then there's another thing. Everything I ever wrote as a liner note, most credits of who's on this album are metadata now, and they're usually not included, and they're certainly not responsibly curated. And really, this is erasure of history. This is I learned stuff from the backs of LPs, from what people wrote, from why Jack DeJohnette was on all these albums, and I could connect the dots. This is like, the way consumers may demand something in an environmental sphere, in a cultural sphere, we should demand, because the context. Like for me, a lot of when you're talking black music, African American music in this country, the history of it, it relies on context. And the musicians have been very good about providing that, and I've tried to provide that, and the people who do what I do. But these services that are delivering music to my kid, they will disrespect that to the point where it's erased.
Yeah, and I think it also makes it very hard to have an album like the one I've written. And I knew that would be the case, and so many people encouraged me not to do this project and to just do an album of standards. You'll work, you'll make money, and that's probably true. But I have always been very connected to nature, as he shared that he had this sort of clairaudient experience. I've always had these clairsentient experience where I feel things. Like I said, even with the glacier, I was walking through it and I could feel this awareness. My husband laughs at me because like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, my plants are thirsty, I have to go water my plants. But it's like I can feel that they need water. And I need to go give them water. Like I have this very spiritual connection to nature, which as a child growing up and for most of my life was very overwhelming for me. And I shut it out as best as I could. And just now in my 40s, am I starting to embrace it and talk about it? Because it sounds kind of crazy. But I think one of the main things that I really wanted to do and why I decided to do the album this way instead of being like, oh, well, what's the single going to be? And what could I put on a playlist on Spotify to get more streams? No, I created a body of work, and you need to listen to the whole thing in its entirety because I wanted people to stop. People who are in service of nature are not in service of greed and power. I wanted people to have a moment, like put your headphones on, go for a walk, listen to it. Do you know what I mean? I wanted people to have to stop your very busy lives where music is in the background or it's your hype song while you're putting your makeup on to go out or whatever. Stop. Connect with nature. I had several experiences with plant medicine as I was writing this music that also helped to open up and give me access to just deeper connections with nature. And this all helped me to facilitate a full arc of, each one of the 4 segments is its own story, but there's a full arc from beginning to end of the album. And in order to hear that, you've got to stop. And people don't want to stop. So, that's also hard in a streaming environment where it's,
But also you did something, we can hear music differently because of the context you placed it in, but also we can hear Miss Margaret.
You can hear Miss Margaret,
in a different context than we would ever, she might be a soundbite in a CNN story if they ever cared.
Right.
But it would be very different. You
Yeah.
wouldn't hear it the way.
And you wouldn't hear that whole story. Like, she really tells a full story on the album.
And you wouldn't hear the music in her voice.
Yeah.
Can I say it's like bouncing off of what you said? Was it Donny Hathaway on the live album when he's like, from the pool of black genius?
Oh, yeah.
From the pool of black genius. From the pool of black genius. That's where you're coming from with this, in my opinion. And you can come and take my energy in the environment class and take all the notes and be there, all day. But you don't have to, because you can listen to, you can hear this piece of music and get the sentiment, understand why this is important here. And that's what connecting the dots is about.
Yeah. And I also feel like, as somebody who's done years and years of DEI work, there's a lot of people that don't want to hear it. If I'm like, there's so many people who will never consider Miss Margaret's story because, I don't want to hear about something that's happening in the black community, or, this is a DEI thing, I'm not interested. But if you're listening to a song and then all of a sudden it's not about it being some work that you have to do or something to make you feel bad, you're just listening to the story of this woman and her community and what's happening. And with all of the emotion of the music behind it, my hope is that it will open a space in people to be like, wait a minute, I didn't know that was happening. And I felt that, right? And like once that little door of feeling starts to open, then you can here's a little bit more. Here's a little bit more of what's happening, right? And music is really just a key to open the door where people maybe, I don't want to hear about climate change or whatever, where people are blocking things out or unexpected. I've done this like in a park, right? And not everybody that was standing there in the park knew that they were coming to see From the Earth that day. They were just like, there's live music over there. What's happening? And you never know what their perspectives and opinions and beliefs were walking into that park that day. But maybe, just maybe, I got them to feel something that they didn't expect to feel that day. And that's kind of where the work starts. That's like the baseline. We've got to really start changing this before we can change any of this.
The revolution will not be televised.
The revolution will not be televised. That's right.
Can
Bill
I just
Scott-Heron.
jump in and publicly offer praise for the intentionality behind the work?
Thank you.
I think, what you were just saying, music has always functioned as a precursor to social change,
100%.
right? And I think a lot of the power of the project derives from the intentionality behind it. And speaking of spiritual traditions, right, there are spiritual traditions that we could talk about where certain music is not played because of the sensitivity of the vibration, because they understand how powerful the vibrations can be. And I really feel like one of the things that, right, that's right. So I'm thinking, for example, right, of Lukumi or Regla de Ocha, right, where certain rituals are not played, or rhythms or certain drums are not played because of the vibration and the power that can happen through the music. One of the things that I think is so beautiful about From the Earth is the vibrations are right. So given the opportunity for people to come into the space, right, that the message takes root so much more deeply because of the intentionality behind it and the stories that you've chosen to include. I teach ethnography to my students. From the Earth is an amazing example of how to work with community members and to tell other people's stories and to amplify them. And it's one of the things that drew me to the album outright, is that comes through not just in people's words and in your lyrics, but in the orchestration. And I could put my musicologist hat on and talk about instrumental timbre and everything like that. But the forethought and the intention of the work, it makes it so much more impactful, I think, to maximize the potential that music has in general. It's such a gift.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the project, and also thank you to the Jazz Museum for giving me this opportunity, because it has been a challenge since the album has come out to have opportunities to perform it, because I cannot tell you how many venues are like, oh, it doesn't have any standards on it. Can you do a tribute show? Oh, like 99% of the time they're like, oh, well, can you just do like, some Gershwin? And I'm like, I mean, I could, but I kind of feel like right now From the Earth maybe slaps a little bit harder.
I mean,
So thank you
they
for
wanted,
recognizing.
Abby used to
and
say
giving
they wanted
space.
her to sing standards too, and she chose to write her complicated
She's one
personal
of my heroes.
narratives. But what you were saying, Mark, I mean, there's a reason why the instrument that Orion plays, drums, why enslaved people had their drums taken away.
Yep.
Because the power of it was sensed. And there's a reason why the one place in this country where there was a little period where they weren't taken away, New Orleans, something unusual happened there. But it is, I will also just, shower you with more praise. There's a lot of well-intentioned efforts to put together social concerns and artistry. It's very rare when you get the balance, that balance where one does not, they work together and it's not, okay, this is really important and serious issue, but I don't like the music, or, hey, this music is great, but I'm not sure that I can connect it to the intent. I mean, it's so clear, and we can also hear like the resonance of a quartz bowl together with an electronic wind instrument. And they make musical and logical sense together, which to me, that forces me into a different space. Like,
That's why I like to start with the crystal bowls. I always start any performance of From the Earth with a sound bath, because it changes the energy in the room. And some people have experienced crystal bowls before, some people haven't, but whether you know what you're getting into, there's just something about it. So if you come in and you're like angry about something or whatever, there's just something about the vibration of the bowls that's very dismantling. And I feel like it peels off a layer of the day, of whatever your day has been, which makes it a little bit easier for me to sort of present all of this beautiful music. And the first time that I had bought crystal bowls, and I was just doing them for myself at home. I'd never thought about incorporating it into jazz. I just kind of liked the sound, and like I'll play it for my son when he won't go to sleep. That was about as far as I went, and I was out of the country doing a plant medicine ceremony, and one of the shamans had a crystal bowl, and she was singing while she was playing it. And there was just something about the combination. And I don't know why I'd never thought to like sing and play my bowls, but I just hadn't. And the vibration and the way that the vibration of her voice and the vibration of the bowls just kept this balance was so powerful. And that encouraged me to incorporate it into the work. And again, it's like, Andromeda, are you really about to be the girl that plays crystal bowls at a jazz gig? Like, it's kind of wild. But I was like, you know what? My dad plays the seashells. So I'm gonna go for it. Like, if my dad can get up there and play the seashells, then I can play the crystal bowls. If Sun Ra can Sun Ra and Pharaoh can Pharaoh,
that part.
talk about eco-spiritual traditions, right? Then why can I not, as a woman, but still, it's 2025.
But also
crystal
you
bowls
use them in the band
Yeah.
in a way where every note and every overtone you get out of that fits what the band is doing, which that to me is a little bit magical, and intensely musical. I get the impression that the collaborations that were born of this will extend between the three of you. So I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about where that might lead, or how you want to?
What I would love is for Raya to just talk a little bit more about what she's working on right now, and how anybody in the audience who wants to get involved or wants to help or wants to call people, I know you mentioned some even with the funding for the arts, can get involved. Would you mind?
Please, yes.
Thank you. And again, she won't stop, right? She's platforming folks who are, doing the work. And it's hard. It's a hard time, and it's just, a struggle to focus on environmental justice. But really what I want to say is that this movement needs every single one of you. Every single one of you. And it's totally cool if your first dive in is be in social media. We're trying to leave the metas. We leave in the X's, but we're going to get there. But if that's the first way you tap in, there is no more robust time to get involved in climate and environmental justice, which is about racial justice. We're not going to, it's capital R, even though, we in Trump times.
Yeah. You gotta lean in harder, I feel. I'm not gonna stop saying DEI because it's not trendy right now. It is what it is. I've been doing this work my whole life, as you have.
That's exactly right.
Lean in.
There's never been a more robust time to tap into climate environmental justice, especially in New York, especially in New York State. You can start by the interwebs. You can follow Climate Auntie. I can put you on to different things to follow. There's so many ways to tap in. To her point, my organization is the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center. I'm a climate environmental justice attorney and activist. We're based in New Rochelle, which is Westchester. We do a lot of local organizing, grassroots organizing, and education around environmental justice. That includes air quality, that includes access to green space. We do marine science education, and we also do a lot of state-based advocacy. So it is ejlpc.org. It is Climate Auntie on Instagram and Blue Sky. Just tap in. I'm delighted to tap in with folks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Mark and I are hoping to expand this. Do you want to talk more about what our hopes are?
Sure. Just to amplify the point that's just been made, I think that we, whether we're certified DEI coordinators or not, this is everyone. I just want to amplify the point that this is everyone's work.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
This is everyone's work. So I have spent most of my adult life in New York, but I find myself recently at the University of Miami. So to do this work in Florida.
I think we're all living in Florida now.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah.
You're brave.
And to do it in Miami, where whole sections of the city flood when it rains for just a few minutes, right?
Except the black area, Liberty City, which they're trying to climate gentrify.
Yeah, yes, right. There's a lot happening, and
There's
I mean,
so
there's a
much
lot happening
happening,
everywhere,
yeah.
right? But the point is, as this is everyone's work, I am trying constantly to find the spaces in the institutions that I'm fortunate enough to have access to, opportunities to amplify the work that Andromeda is doing, to amplify the work that's being done by nonprofits that are under threat, even as threat of academic funding and institutions, funding for institutions of higher learning. So Andromeda and I are really hoping to move this project through those institutions of higher learning that have funding available. So I don't really have anything to report concrete, so I'm not going to say any names. But we've been working on a series of grant proposals to have the work performed along with like a day of events wherein we're dialoguing with university people, folks who are engaged in these issues, but also to welcome community members who are doing the work on the ground. We want to take this on tour because it's a message that needs to be heard everywhere. And one of the aspects of my work as an ethnomusicologist here, Andromeda's helping me out with this book that I'm working on, right? But I tell my students all the time, reciprocity is something that's so important, right? So to thank her for the time that she spent with me, right? Working on these grants to help amplify the project, right? And get it out to be heard to as many people as possible, especially as, well, the awards help now. People will pay attention more, right? But especially as you've confronted these issues around radio stations and just, like not having the record be out in commercial avenues. There are other spaces that it could be heard in.
And with every performance that I've done of From the Earth, I always connect with local environmental groups and give them a space during the concert to address the audience. And it's been really beautiful because every community has different things happening and it's different people that respond. So like one event, we had a composting group that came and they were in a city. And a lot of people in that city didn't even know that there was free composting available to them. And it wasn't a huge number, it was like 40 people. But we got 40 people to sign up for composting on that gig. The last one we did, I had a community garden come and they talked about food sovereignty and the importance of food sovereignty, and they handed out seeds to anyone that wanted seeds. I did a concert in a more residential area where it was homes, not apartments, and I got a bioenergy company agreed to give away 10 free home audits where they would come to people's houses and audit for energy inefficiency and make recommendations on how they could be more energy efficient to reduce their need on, the grid or oil or gas or whatever it is that they're using. So the music is really just kind of like a front to like help get this work done. And my main mission now with, as we go forward is, yes, that work, but also just getting people spiritually, energetically, emotionally to realize that we are nature. Like we're mammals. We are a part of the environment. It is not a thing that is separate from us. We are guardians of nature, but we are nature and we're a part of it, and encouraging people to just have that deeper connection.
Well, maybe this can be a little bit of a seed toward the larger projects you're talking about. This whole series is meant as, a salon, so we have a little bit of time. If people have one or a couple of questions you might want to ask, you don't have to, but if there's anything you want to know from our panel or you want to know more about, I know, back there, I have a question. Just say it out loudly.
Thank you.
One question that I had is, what were some of the inspirations that you loved from? I know you kind of talked about like communicating and being in community with members who were about like artivism, but were
Yeah.
Talk about Black genius and jazz and the social activism that you pull from to just spiritually get into.
A lot. So definitely Abby Lincoln, as I mentioned, Max Roach, the Finger on the Trigger song is inspired by a great Max Roach album song called It's Time. But I also drew from, like there's a whole segment, one of the 4 communities is in Puerto Rico. And so as I was composing the music for Puerto Rico, some of those songs are in Spanish. And it's all got a Latin jazz feel to it. I was listening to a lot of Jerry Gonzalez and Andy Gonzalez.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great, great musicians.
Fort Apache.
I was just about to say, if you've never heard the Fort Apache band, go check them out. Gil Scott-Heron. I listened to a lot of Gil Scott-Heron. And I listened to actually a lot of Bjork because she's very connected with nature, as well as Meredith Monk, who's another big inspiration of mine. So there was a wide variety of inspirations from more of like the divine feminine with Bjork and Meredith and Abby to, you know, picking out, also McCoy Tyner. I probably listened to the most of when I was writing Sama Layuka. That's my favorite McCoy Tyner album. It's beautiful, Sama Layuka. It's about like sand dunes in Mexico. That's another good one.
And I want to thank that questioner for saying that beautiful C word, community, because sometimes it can be a dirty word, but really throughout jazz history, from Miles Davis to Sun Ra to
Pharaoh. I listen to a lot of Pharaoh.
that, you know, I hear less, I play jazz music, and more, I play community music. And like that's a direct quote from many musicians before my time and that I've interviewed. So, you know, and we're kind of a community now.
Yeah.
So do we have another question? Does anyone back there? Go ahead. Just say it out loudly.
Hey, TK.
Oh,
Great
man.
musician, TK
Wait a
Blue
minute.
in the house.
Wait a minute.
Thank you.
I want to say one of the things that we really need to draw attention to, especially in places like Africa. I spent a lot of time in Africa, and recycling is
Oh, it's such a problem.
a huge problem. Senegal has pristine beaches, but with plastic, with glass, with metal, recycling. In many of the countries I've been over 40 countries in Africa.
Wow.
All of them have very little recycling efforts. I don't know if there's any way we can focus attention on that. Maybe try to construct some type of portable units that they can send over there to help them recycle. Because recycling is a huge problem.
Well, maybe that's the next project and we can do it together, TK. I started the focus of From the Earth just because like me trying to think about writing an album about the whole world was extremely overwhelming, and I'm like, this album's gonna be 37 hours long. So I was like, we'll do North America, right? So From the Earth, all of the 4 communities are in North America. One's outside of Chicago, one's in West Oakland, California, one's up in Newfoundland, Canada, and one's in Puerto Rico, right? It's all North America. But maybe the next project
Get
is
Pan-African
Africa.
with it.
So let's talk about that.
And I love the fact that you addressed water.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a scuba diver. And
Really?
there's another issue with ocean.
Yeah, she mentioned that, yeah.
Plastics in the oceans, and people don't have the consciousness they throw plastics away, especially plastic bags. So it's really important, and I just support what you're doing.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to have you here, TK.
Yeah, thanks for
Can
coming.
can we say the name Randy Weston out loud? Can we say that name
Yeah.
out loud? Okay. It's just,
I definitely know some waste orgs on the continent who are doing some work. When you want to get connected, you're going to get.
You see, now
Pan-African
we've
with
already
it.
got the activism connection in Africa.
I got you. Wherever you need to go, I can find you somebody to talk to.
Yeah, I
promise.
definitely want to expand this project. I also want to connect with the Amazon rainforest because I have felt very energetically called and connected and interested in what's happening over there. And so, you know, maybe the next one is like, we're starting to branch out, but I don't think that this is a subject matter that I'm like, I did this one album and I'm done, and like the next one's going to be like, you know, Gershwin. Like, this is me. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I care about. And like, who knows what's next? But if you see that I put out an album about Africa and climate change, you guys heard it first.
I will say that the next UN climate talks are in the Amazon in Brazil.
Yeah,
this
I know.
When
I'm
does
like,
that happen?
I gotta go.
November.
Yeah.
And the United States won't be participating, but
But that
Really?
doesn't mean that you and I couldn't
That's
participate,
exactly
right?
right. That's
so
the plan.
it's like maybe our elected officials have withdrawn, but the American people don't necessarily
That's
have to
right.
withdraw. Maybe our president and our, senators might not be there to represent us, but, I would do my best to be in those spaces and other people that are doing this work to make sure that people outside of this continent know that there are Americans also who are still caring, who are still doing this work, who are connected to the earth and want it to survive and want to thrive with it.
just emphasizing this Pan-African seed.
Yeah.
Once you start digging in, you're gonna be like, wow.
Oh, there's
Well,
so much
I
work
mean-
to do. I could do it a different album every year for the rest of my life, and I couldn't address all of the climate issues that we're having. So, yeah.
We are reaching that moment where we have to come to a close. But before we say anything else, Raya, could you just say again the website or places where we should go to connect with your work and these issues?
Thank you so much. Yes, so I am really climbing onto you on Blue Sky, I guess, or or Instagram. My organization is ejlpc.org. But Instagram is good because if you message me, I will follow you back and I can message you. If you've got specific areas of interest or questions, you want to work on something in Brooklyn or you're in Westchester.
Come to Miami, please.
You in Florida. So I'm happy to interact with folks, absolutely.
And I feel like that is really where you need to start. I will say, like, if all you can do to start is like an energetic shift, that's super powerful. So if you leave out of here and you're not able to change anything in your lifestyle, but you've got an energetic shift as to how you're relating to the environment and to the earth, good job. If
that's-
you can
oh,
do
sorry.
more, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to that point, this is what in the movement, what do we do?
Yeah.
We say, what do we want? And people say, climate justice. What do we want?
Climate justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Climate justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it,
Shut
it
it
down.
down.
Just a little chanting
Yeah.
for energy.
All right. The idea was please leave here not only with the resonance of that music in your ears and in your heart, but these ideas, these issues, these thoughts,
Keep
hopefully
learning.
they will ripple out into whatever, your home, your life, your friends, your political action. But we're hoping that this just creates ripples in lots of directions. So please help me thank these three people who've been so generous.
Raya Salter, Mark Lamano. Thank you,
Andromeda
Larry.
Turre.
Larry Blumenfeld. Come on.
I just work here.
No, you are an icon. Don't sell yourself short.
Thank you so much. It was very generous, and thank you for coming and keep the conversation. The conversation will continue.
Keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you.